Hello, and welcome to Save Your Sanity Help for Toxic Relationships. I'm Dr. Rhoberta Shaler. I'm glad you're here. We're going to be talking this evening about two important concepts that we really have to understand if we want to understand how we get sort of entwined and enmeshed and entrenched in the muddle with a hijackal, a difficult person, a person who has a tendency to want to take over the relationship, run everything, manipulate, maybe lie a little, maybe a lot. These difficult people that I talk about, I call them hijackals because I thought we needed a name that did not have a clinical diagnosis attached to it. So we could just talk about the way these people behave, what they do, what they say, what they expect, what they demand, all the things that go with it. So I created the term hijackals. And to my definition, hijackals are people who hijack relationships for their own interests and needs and purposes and then proceed to relentlessly scavenge a relationship for power, for status, and for control. So, if you think that's going on in your relationship with a parent, a partner, a sibling, an adult child, or the person in the next cubicle, you're definitely in the right place. So many times I bring you ideas and how to recognize something that's going on and what to do about it. Today it's kind of a double whammy. I'm going to bring you two things. Beware of introjection and projection. And we use those terms to be very carefully defined. So you may have heard of the term projection because that's something that is more often spoken of. So we'll talk about that first. And projection is really when you're not very happy about what's going on within you and you don't want to confront it. You don't want to take care of it. So instead of doing that, you throw it at the other person and say, "This is what's going on with you." So that's not a very deep definition of that. So let's try this one. Projection is displacing one's feelings onto a different person, particularly attributing one's own unacceptable thoughts, motives, and behaviors onto another person. So think about that, how the hijackal does that. They displace their feelings, their bad feelings, onto a different person. So they'll particularly attribute their own unacceptable thoughts, motives, and behaviors and say they're yours because they don't want them. They don't want to accept them. They don't want to believe they have them. They know they have them, but they don't want to believe they have them. They don't want to take accountability or responsibility for it. So therefore, they project it on you, just like a movie projector. Whatever is on their screen, they're projecting onto you so that they hope that it will not land and be part of them. So this becomes a very important thing to know. And when you're dealing with projection, the hijacker wants to avoid confronting their own unacceptable feelings. So it's sort of that there ain't no flies on me kind of thing. Like, I'm fine, but you have a problem. Right? It gets all entrenched in there with all the blame shifting and everything, which you'll see as we go on. But they just cannot face up to inadequacies. Now, don't be putting your compassion hats on too firmly here, but remember, you didn't break them. You can't fix them, but I can help you understand a little bit about what's going on in there. And they are so afraid of being wrong or blamed or shamed that they immediately have these defense mechanisms that throws everything back at you. So you know that everything becomes your fault with a hijackal, right? Everything becomes your fault. You plan a picnic and it rains, it's your fault. The weather is your fault. Everything is your fault. Income taxes are your fault. Everything is your fault. So they cannot take on any fault load. They will not. So what they do with it is they say, "No, that's your problem. You have that." So they can talk about the problem without ever owning it. Now, that's really convoluted, isn't it? That's really complex. It's difficult. They have a feeling, they have a thought, they have an issue. They don't like that it's true about them. So what do? They offload it on you. And that's called projection. So that's what blame shifting often is. And I did a whole podcast on blame shifting. You might remember that, or go back and listen. And if you've been enjoying these things, go back and listen to other ones of them. You can go to Save Your Sanity podcast um, and hear all of them on my website, or you can go wherever you like to get podcasts and you'll find me there. Just put in Save Your Sanity and you'll find me there. And if you'd like to support the work, which I really would appreciate it if you did, if you find value here, go and create a donation, a monthly donation or a one-time donation at patreon.com/saveyoursanity. Patreon.com/saveyoursanity. So blame shifting, again, you go to a hijackal and you say, I'd like to talk about this problem. No sooner do you outline the problem than all of a sudden you are the problem. And that is a form of projection. They don't want to deal with it, so it hits their light and they project it back on you. And it's important to understand that so you won't take things personally. The healthier people, we're self-reflective. If somebody says we do this, we'll have a think about it. We will say, do I do this? Do I do that often? How could it be perceived that I do that? And we'll actually consider, is this mine? But a hijackal refuses to have the capacity to do that. They do not want anything negative or even remotely negative to come anywhere near them. So therefore, they turn it on you. Therefore, it's really important not to take it personally, to be able to see that that's a projection. And actually, I'm learning something about the hijackal. I'm not going to take it on. I am going to put up my Teflon shield and let it slip off and say, that's curious. So that's what you're afraid of. Now, don't say that out loud. You never poke a hijackal if you're following my advice. But that's what's going on in your head. Here you are telling me all about me. Actually, what you're doing is giving me an inside look at what's going on within you. And if you can make that flip, if you could come to that place of not taking it on, not just grabbing onto it like you're Velcro. No, don't do that. Turn on your Teflon and say, I know these things aren't true of me, but how interesting is it that you're bringing them up and blaming them on me? So you're giving me an inside look at you, Mr. and or Ms. Hijackal. Very important. But the problem with this whole interaction, because they won't own any of these things, they won't confront any of these things, is that it makes them very difficult to solve problems with, right? Because they don't ever have a problem. You are always the problem. So you can see how this compounds things and why it's really important to understand these topics, because it's nothing to do with you that they will not take something to resolution. Yes, it's something to do with you because you'd really like the resolution, but it doesn't mean that there's something to do with you that they're talking about. So if you could take that other position, it would be helpful, because hijackals use projection to protect their self-image in their head. They want to make sure that they're fine and everybody else is wrong. Then somehow they can breathe easier. Whew, they dodged a bullet or something. But for you, as the child or the partner or the mother of or the worker beside, it's important not to take these things on and take them personally. I know that's so easy for me to say and much more difficult to do. I understand that. But hopefully just hearing this often enough, you can create that separation. You can begin to say, I have done the self reflection. I've looked at myself. I honestly do not believe I do these things. And therefore, maybe it is just projection on me, and I need to take it as information about the hijackal and what it requires from you. Starting in small ways, as you probably heard me say before, little tiny ways, is boundary setting, boundary expressing, and boundary maintenance. Really important. So if you are just learning to set boundaries, again, go to saveyoursanitypodcast.com, and there's a little magnifying glass there for the search, and just put boundaries in there, and you will find the podcasts I've done on boundaries. So projection is a really big thing that we have to be aware of. And hopefully you are aware of it. And now, of course, you definitely are, because it will save you a lot of heartache. Yeah, you still have to deal with the fact that somebody's blaming you for everything. But if you know that you're not the one at fault, and you just become curious that the hijackal is telling you what they're really afraid of inside about themselves, that can sometimes help you through some of the tougher spots. And I know it is always unfair that if you have a hijackal in your life, you end up doing the work because they won't. I understand that. I empathize. I sympathize. It's just the way it is. They are not going to do the work. But if you can do the work, you can keep yourself a lot safer. And that's really an important thing to be able to do. So we've talked a lot now about projection. Quite simple. We know what a projector is. We know that it shines light on somebody else, on the wall, not back at itself. So hijackals project what they're afraid is true of themselves onto you, and then say, no, you have that nasty trait, or you have that behavior, or you think that way, when really that's not true at all. So understand that one. And then let's look at this one that you may not have met before. You may not be well acquainted with this, and it's so important. And that is the opposite of projection. Okay. Projection is when the hijackal is putting it out of them onto you. But when we get to introjection, this is a different process entirely. And so, what introjection is when you unconsciously internalize, take on, and incorporate the characteristics, ideas, or attitudes of other people, read hijackals, into your own thoughts and behavior in order to reduce anxiety or fear of loss. So, that's really important for us to understand that to kind of be safe, well, I'll take it on myself. I will I will become that other person. I will be like that other person. And maybe then they'll like me. Maybe then they'll feel more my presence. Maybe then I can fill in some place where I'm feeling empty or blank. And so I'll be like them in order to reduce my anxiety or my fear that they will go away. And the first people that behave like that in our lives are our parents. Introjection is how we learn from our parents so much. We just unconsciously take on their beliefs, their attitudes. You know, you watch a little child who's just learning to stand up, and you see how carefully they've been watching the people in the house, because you'll watch that little child stand there and you go, wow, they stand just like their dad. They've been watching, they've been unconsciously picking up even the stance of somebody. So if you need that outside authority to like you, which is the case with children, then you will unconsciously pick up the attitudes and the thoughts and the behaviors and the desires and the requests of other people. And it goes even further. If you were a child and you had maybe emotionally unavailable parents, I've spoken so much about brain development, but because you're little and your brain is not developed as much as it will be, um, you you try to be like the parent that's absent to assure yourself, to give yourself some sense of security that, oh, they're not absent. So you try to take on their essence, and that is introjection. It's a protective strategy. It's a defense mechanism, and when you unconsciously internalize and incorporate these characteristics, you hope that you will get it right and your anxiety will be reduced and your fear of loss will be quelled. So, a child exposed to a negative home life unconsciously absorbs that they're worthless or they're incompetent or they're guilty of something or they're not interesting or they don't deserve attention and love. They just take it on. And it's a really big problem because they feel unable to freely express emotion after a while. They're living other people's emotions. They're living for what will happen if the other person does this and how will the other person like me. So it may be difficult for them to individuate, which is a healthy thing to do. We all say, oh, these kids, they get so difficult when they become teenagers. Well, it's because they're individuating. They're saying things like, well, you might think that, but I don't. And that is individuation. They want to have their own thoughts. They want to say, I'm different than you. I'm separate from you. Sometimes we say they rebel. They want to be so different and so separate from us. But individuation is healthy. But if individuation doesn't happen well, we can be living from the results of introjection. And so we'll become very self critical. Our inner courtroom will work overtime. I think about my own family. You've heard me say before, I'm an only child of two hijackals. And I think about the times that to get their attention was absolutely so difficult, except when I became exceptionally good at playing the piano and singing. And until that time, I was a nuisance. And I think in one other podcast, I told the story just to illustrate that. I remember so distinctly, my parents owned a store and we lived above the store. And my parents were always in the store. So one Sunday when the store was closed, I was 7 years old and I asked my mother if she would come and play with me. And she told me that she was too busy. And I remember doing this myself, but I remember it because my mother told the story at my expense many times. I said to her, I don't know why you had a child. You're either too tired or too busy. Now, fortunately, I, for some reason, did not take on the level of introjection that I could have because I could see them a little more clearly. I was just fortunate. But that doesn't mean that they didn't make all kinds of inroads on making me second guess myself and my worth. And was I only worthy when I played the piano? When I was only worthy when I played the piano and won something? And that's how we take on who we are. So when we individuate, we take that with us, So you take on, perhaps, I certainly did, I became hugely self critical. My mother's tape was running in my head with all her criticisms all the time. Even when she wasn't present, I was hearing her voice. Have you had that experience with a hijackal parent or partner? You're already knowing what they're going to say. You can hear what they're going to say. You can see the look on their face. You know what's up. And it's nasty stuff, really nasty. And we have to get that out of us. I have clients all over the world and we all have the same problem. We all need to get rid of that. And it is entrenched in us. It is almost in our tightest corners and crevices of our heart and soul and mind. And we have to slowly get that out, right? So I like this definition that I found for introjection from the Good Therapy blog. And they wrote that introjection may lead individuals to pay an inordinate amount of attention to the beliefs of others rather than their own personal needs. So, do you find yourself always in, what does the hijackal need? What do I need to do? How can I please them? How can I stay out of their way? How can I give them what they need and hope they'll like me? Well, you know what happens in that situation. The more you give them, the more they want. You can't ever fill up a hijackal's cup. It's impossible. It has a hole in the bottom. You just can't do it. And I'll say it again. Remember, you didn't break them and you can't fix them. It's so important to remember. But if you get all entrenched, then introjection may lead you to be spending all your time trying to figure out the hijackal. What do they need? What do they want? What do they believe? How can I be like them? How can I see things their way? And you lose yourself. You just lose yourself. And that is not healthy. It doesn't feel good either, but it is not healthy. So when you're with a hijackal, you're trying to please them, or maybe you're afraid they'll leave. Either way, you can fall victim subconsciously to introjection, and you might internalize their criticisms. You might start believing what they say is wrong with you is wrong with you. Even after you've done all self-reflection and asked all your healthy friends and they've told you, no, that's not wrong with you, you may start believing it because of your tight relationship with the hijackal. And you might start taking them on. Those criticisms may become part of your inner courtroom, of your inner critic. And they play out and play out and play out. A lot of the times I'm helping my clients find the places where those things are stuffed in and getting them out, being free of them, because that will cause us to have a loss of self, as I said, a loss of self-confidence. Like, whoa, if I can't be me, I certainly can't be confident being them. So now I've got a real problem. And also a lack of individuation. As I said, we get really absorbed in how can I get it right so the other person will like me or not leave me. We get all involved, and that's kind of warped and crazy, but it's very natural for many people to just bit by bit find themselves entering into that dynamic, and then they're exhausted by it. And then finally they say, ah, this is not good for me. Hopefully they say that. And they end up here at the podcast or on my YouTube channel for relationship help, or at my website for relationshiphelp.com. And you start looking into what's really going on. So introjection is important because it also contains pieces of the cycle of abuse. You might start believing what your abuser says and feel as worthless as they tell you you are. I know a few light bulbs just went off. Allow that moment of grief and sadness to be felt, but know that you don't have to stay there. Because when you get into the cycle of abuse, you may get so entrenched in that cycle of abuse that you start believing the bad press that is not true about you that the hijackal is selling. And you may start believing that they know you better than you know yourself. And that is a terrible thing that they like to say to you. Don't ever believe that, and don't ever make that true. They do not. They are using you. And you must see that. You must understand that you are being used. You are being manipulated. You are being deceived. Very important. So if you have started to believe what the abuser says, or if you have started to have this introjection where you subconsciously start to be like them, then we can get into that place that people ask me about all the time. They ask me, I always thought it was the hijackal, but am I the hijackal? They've got you second guessing yourself and questioning your sanity because you have taken on this words, these attitudes, these blames, these criticisms, and now you start to behave like the abuser. You know, many times I'll see on Facebook and I'll respond to it. People will say, well, I gave the hijackal. They don't say that. They say the narcissist usually. But I gave the person back some of their own medicine. Whoa, that's introjection. It doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Yeah, you might have a victory for a hot minute, but it doesn't work because of this cycle. And you start becoming like them. You don't want to be like them. The question I always ask when people talk about that is, who are you? Are you like them? Do you want to be like them? Because if you're giving them back what they gave you, you're turning into them. Otherwise, you would say, no, that's not who I am. And certainly not who I want to be. So it becomes very important to get clear on that, truly clear that you do not want to be an abuser. You do not want to be somebody who is controlling. You do not want to be someone who is deceitful. You do not want to be somebody who is abusive. And, you know, I did a whole program on reactive abuse. That's where the hijackal pushes you and nudges you to get really, really angry. And then you get angry, which is the reactive abuse. And then they say, you see, you're the abuser. You can look that one up too. It's on reactive abuse. So you could become an abuser from all the blame shifting. You have to be really careful. You know, if these words are landing for you, spend some time asking yourself, what have I taken on here? Am I actually trying to fight fire with fire? And that won't help. It really won't help. And because you can see how introjection and projection lead you to ask the question, am I the hijackal here? I usually tell people if you're able to ask that question, it's highly likely you're not the hijackal. But still, the relationship drives you to that point. And its underlying features are the projection and the introjection. So it's very important to recognize these two things. Very important. And you're not them. You're not the hijackal. And you have no need to become them. No need to become them. But you have to be careful. You have no need to accept what they're serving. It doesn't mean you stand up to them. It means that you don't accept what they're serving in your head. And you have no need to agree with them in your head. Right? We don't poke hijackals. But if you begin to understand that what they're selling is not the truth, it's not the truth about you, and you are not going to have them project their worst fears about themselves on you, then what has to happen is you need to get some perspective. You need to get away. Maybe we need to talk about it. That's an offer that I always have for you. Your new client one-time offer, $97 for an hour with me. If you want to check something out, if you think you're the hijackal, let's talk. Go to beaclient.com. Beaclient.com. And if you really need a safe place with other people who need a safe place and are going through similar things to you, come on over and join my Emerging Empowered program. It's my community, Emerging Empowered Community, and you get 2 sessions a month of a group Ask Me Anything call with me. It's a really valuable place to go, so go to joinintoday.com. Joinintoday.com and ask your questions. I'm in there all the time answering questions, talk with other people, support other people, vent, rant, do what you need to do. You're safe. It has no connection to social media, so go to joinintoday.com. So, the big thing you need after thinking about introjection and projection is perspective. You need to step back because you can't see it when your nose is in it. And so, step back and say, is it possible that I have become so involved in the feelings here, so fearful, so exhausted, so used to being put down, torn down, worn down, that I am not seeing this clearly anymore, and I am taking it on subconsciously, and I don't want it. I really don't want it. So I hope that this podcast episode will cause you to say that. I don't want it. You're not going to give it to me. I am giving it back, and I'm going to do that all internally. But I'm beginning to see the dynamics here, and they require a change. They definitely require a change, and that change starts within you. So I hope that this has helped you see clearly and that you can now get some distance and perspective. And of course, you're always welcome to come on over and talk to me at beaclient.com or join the community at joinintoday.com. So until we speak again, be reflective and take very good care of yourself because you're precious and you matter. Talk soon. Good evening. Welcome. I'm glad you're here. I see some comments and things here, so that's great. Let me encourage you all to write your comments or your questions as soon as you can so that I can answer them or respond to them. And for those of you who are new, when the 30 seconds there are no questions or comments on my screen, that's when I say good night. So just know that. So Beatrice says, yes. Okay, well, something struck you in the first 5 minutes, Beatrice. Michelle said, do not take it personally. It's not yours to own. That's exactly right. What is triggered inside of you is personal and none of their business. Stop volunteering to give attention. Oh, well said, Michelle. Stop volunteering to give attention. Very good. Bow Wow Bill says, yay, I've been wanting to catch you live. Well, I'm glad that you did. I'm glad that you're here. Michelle said, you can never satisfy a hijackal. Oh, that's so true. No matter if you do exactly what they said they wanted and you serve it up on a silver platter, now they want something different. And they always will have, you can't avoid it. You cannot heal. The hijackal must go healing and study for themselves. Most likely, the hijackal will never recover. Well, the hijackal has no interest in recovering because the hijackal doesn't believe there's anything wrong with them. They will not let that information in. So much as what you've said is true, absolutely true, Michelle. The other side of it is that they will not see a need for them to do anything because of all the things that I've said tonight. It's all your fault anyway. So therefore, you're the one who has to do something. And what they're hoping is that you will believe them. Michelle added, indeed, I almost became somebody else because of the abuse of the hijackal. Nice word, reactive abuse. Yeah, it's really important to see that. All right. Bauer said, I really like what you said about you didn't create the hijackal and you can't fix them. Yes, keep that in mind. Really keep that in mind. You know, it's not up to you to change the hijackal because you can't, but it's not your job anyway. You didn't provide the trauma or the neglect or the modeling that they received when they were younger, and you cannot make up for it. All the love that you can pour into a hijackal will not make a difference. And you can be the most wonderful, saint-like human in the world. Give them everything that you have, and all they want is more, or they put down what you gave them. It's never enough. So it's very important to do that, to understand that. Remember, everybody, it takes 20 seconds from when you hit send after you've written your post till when I see it. So if you have something to say and you don't want this conversation to end, then make sure you're putting things in the chat now. So Bao said, I have having a huge revelation that I have one in my life. It took a while to realize, but now a lot of crazy making behavior is starting to make sense. I've lost certain aspects of myself during the relationship. Yes, probably because you're a good person. And so you go the extra mile, you give the extra attention, you make excuses and rationalizations and justify. You keep thinking, oh, well, they're just going through a bad patch. They're really stressed right now. They had a bad childhood. All the stories that we tell ourselves. But when you're with a hijackal, that's different. It's not just somebody who's having a momentary issue. What's happened to them has changed who they are and created who they presently are. They probably started out as perfectly fine little tiny babies, but the place that they've lived, the things that they've heard, the things that have and have not been done to them or for them has shaped them into this through introjection. And so you can't make up for that. That's already done. That damage is done. You can't do anything about that. So Bauer said, I lost certain aspects of myself during this relationship. I just wanted to repeat that because that's what happens. You kind of go over to the other side. You give, 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 and you become an overgiver. And a hijackal is definitely an overtaker, right? They just want more and more and more. And what you do give them is sloughed off as what? This is not enough. This is not good enough. What do you think you're doing? Who do you think you are? And that's really sad. Bauer said, I'm always accused of being condescending or patronizing when I try to connect and go the extra explanation. Yes, because they're not buying it. They're not having any of it. They're afraid that it's going to come back and land on them somewhere. So therefore, they've got to be on offense first. And so they are. Patricia, hello. I'm happily away from the hijackal. Yay! Can't get him to stop stalking me. I went no contact in every way and don't know what else I can do. I'd like to know how to heal from the emotional abuse. Well, certainly, if you want to talk to me, just go to beaclient.com, Patricia, and we can talk about a healing process. But the answer to what you can do about somebody stalking you, it depends. Is that stalking like texting and blowing up your phone? Is that stalking like being in the same place where you are far too frequently and far too close? Because these are important things. You can, in fact, report them to the police. People are not allowed to stalk you. So certainly keep every bit of evidence that you have of that and make sure that it is time and date stamped. And if it is texting and all of that, print it out. Make sure you save it. It doesn't disappear from your phone, anything that they do, because we have protections in place from being stalked. Now, yes, the caveat is definitely required. Hijackals don't care, right? But they do care about their image and they do care about their jobs. So if you get the police involved and that could possibly end up with them losing their job, which of course would be all your fault, or if their reputation is tarnished and they can't get another job, that's on them. But they are not allowed to stalk you. So I hope that you get some help with that. And certainly go to beaclient.com and we can talk. Michelle said, oh, thank you. So nicely explained. Good. I hope that met the mark. And Bauer says, thank you for what you do. Sit and listen to your content, nodding my head. It just breaks my heart. Yeah, it is a tough thing. It truly is that we have these people. And, yes, they're hurt. Yes, they're damaged. Yes, they've had trauma. Yes, they've had poor models. All of that is true. But that doesn't mean that your life gets given over to being a caretaker of a dysfunctional human. who will never be functional. It is not mean, it is not unloving to move away from somebody who is unloving to you. It is self-care, and that is really important to see. So very important to see. That is self-care. Nobody's gonna take care of you when you're with a hijackal. You have to take care of you. And often that means finding the pathway to either set boundaries in the relationship and see what happens, calibrate that, and if things cannot be changed, which sometimes they can be. I work with couples often and we can make some small changes, but the hijackal is not going to change. So if we can reduce their fear, sometimes we can make things a little more tolerable, but it's not going to change the hijackal. So take good care of yourself and know that you are charged with the responsibility of your own self-care. And that doesn't include being used and abused by a hijackal. Bao said, I don't want to enable being treated poorly. Yes, and I have read everybody several times my definition of enabling, but I will share that with you, Bao, because I'm not sure that you haven't spoken up in a previous podcast. So my definition of enabling is when you usually step in to fix, solve, rationalize, justify, or make the consequences go away for the poor choices of another person. Really get that last bit, everybody. Make the consequences go away for the poor choices of another person. You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to be anybody's enabler, because that's giving your life over to somebody else who is just going to use and abuse it. Get into a healthier relationship with yourself first. And then when you have a really healthy relationship with yourself, then maybe you'll find someone else. People ask me all the time when I leave the relationship and whatever legalities there are, everything settles out and I am separate from them. How long should it be before I date? And my answer is date yourself for one trip around the sun. Date yourself for a year and get some help to heal, because you can't know the damage that's been done. You may know the big pieces, but you won't know the small ones. So you're absolutely right, Bow Wow. You don't want to enable being treated poorly. And you need to show that self-care, that self-love, that I stand for something and my life means something, and I do not subjugate my life or give it away to the demands of someone else. So that magic moment has come. Nothing has popped up for the last 30 seconds. So these are important things that we're talking about. And if they have meaning to you, if you start to realize, understand now, I've never known about introjection, you might want to look into that. Look into projections so that when the light gets shone on you and you're being projected on, that you see it and go, turn that thing off. you know, you're not going to put your stuff on me. And Bow ends tonight by saying, you speak the truth. I deserve to live my authentic self. And you all do. So thank you so much for being with me this evening. Come on over to my Emerging Empowered community. So many wonderful things for you over there. And it's a good time to join. The community is young and there's so much airtime for you to ask me questions. Come on to the Ask Me Anything calls twice a month, the group calls. That's all part of your membership. And you get 20% discount on all of my products, my books, and my courses. So until we speak again, take good care of yourself, because you're precious and you matter. Talk soon.